This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, North Korea is threatening to torpedo the planned summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, and it's suspended talks with South Korea because of a U.S.-South Korean military drill. The Trump administration caught completely by surprise, scrambling right now to react. I'll speak with the Republican Senator Rand Paul of the Foreign Relations Committee and our correspondents and specialists. They are all standing by with full coverage. But let's get right to the breaking news. North Korea threatening to quit the summit with the United States. Our chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, is joining us. Jim, a truly stunning threat by Kim Jong-un's regime. What is this all about?
Well, it's not clear what this is all about. In fact, we heard from the State Department a short time ago saying that they have not heard of any changes to summit planning. They have also not heard of any changes to the reaction to these previously planned U.S.-South Korean military drills. To be clear, these are annual drills. They are regularly scheduled. They were resumed in April 4th after being delayed some time for the South Korean Olympics. And at the time, South Korean officials told their U.S. counterparts that North Korea, which in the past had protested these exercises, even scheduled missile launches during the exercises, had seemed, in their words, surprisingly flexible this time around. So this threat now to scuttle those summit plans, certainly a change in tack from the North Korean leadership. And you may remember that it was just a short time ago that the president himself said in late April that North Korea had been, in his words, very honorable in planning for the summit. Have a listen.
So we're having very good discussions. Kim Jong-un he really has been very open and I think very honorable from everything we're seeing. Now, a lot of promises have been made by North Korea over the years, but they've never been in this position.
Of course, North Korea did fulfill their promise to release those Americans. Of course, the president welcomed them home just last week. So this is a change from that. North Korea, as you and I well know, Wolf, expert in brinksmanship and past negotiations. They've done this a lot before. So is this just an instance of brinksmanship? Are they trying to squeeze out another concession prior to those talks? It's not clear. The White House, we're waiting for a statement from the White House, and they say they're going to respond to this shortly. Yeah,
total surprise, though. Everybody seems to be caught by surprise with this one, Jim.
Absolutely.
Stand by. There's more we need to get to. The U.S.-South Korea military exercise is ongoing. Our Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr is joining us right now. Tell us about this exercise named Max Thunder.
Max Thunder, what a name. Well, you know, that's an annual, regular, routinely scheduled exercise, according to the Pentagon. Focuses a lot on U.S. and South Korean forces practicing air maneuvers. Another exercise also going on right now, Foal Eagle. That is going on. That involves land and air forces. And you're talking about several thousand U.S. troops. Now, why does the U.S. over the decades insist on doing these exercises? They say it's so that both U.S. and South Korean forces know how to operate with each other in a contingency, in a crisis, and that it helps defend the peninsula. Kim Jong-un has never been happy about them, and he just recently, in terms of canceling this upcoming meeting later today, Wednesday already in the peninsula, he called it provocative military disturbances, even though he had said that he was more flexible in understanding why these exercises take place. So we come full circle. Why is he being so provocative again? Is he trying to squeeze another concession out of the U.S.? Does he see President Trump so anxious to achieve a summit that Kim thinks he can maneuver against him? Or is it possible that somewhere inside the regime, some other pressure is being exerted on Kim and he is feeling that pressure? We don't know the answer. This afternoon, U.S. agencies across Washington scrambling, Wolf, to figure it all out.
The intelligence community anxious to try to find out what's going on. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon. Thanks. The North Korean threat about the summit certainly caught the Trump administration completely by surprise. The White House is now scrambling to come up with a formal public response. Let's go to our White House correspondent, Boris Sanchez. What are you learning, Boris?
Hey there, Wolf. Yeah, aides have told CNN that they were caught completely off guard by this warning from the North Koreans and the announcement that they would be scuttling these talks with South Korea. One senior administration official telling us that the president was made aware of this news through news reports, not an official announcement coming from Pyongyang. We should also note that the communications shop right now is working with the State Department and with the National Security Council to craft a response. And the big question is going to be, how does Donald Trump, someone who's known for his brash rhetoric, specifically against North Korea, how does he respond to this, considering the amount of momentum moving toward a positive direction in this summit with Kim Jong-un set for Singapore about a month from now? There have been signs of good faith on both sides. President Trump going from calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man to just this weekend saying that he was smart and gracious. On the other side, the North Koreans calling Donald Trump a dotard and then ultimately releasing these 3 prisoners just last week. This latest development sort of underscores an argument that has been made for a long time by skeptics. Some, like John Bolton, the national security advisor, who just this weekend brought up the history between these two countries. The fact that there have been several deals with North Korea that ultimately that regime has violated. We have to point out that many believe that this is simply a charade, that it is a game that North Korea is playing, perhaps to test Donald Trump and to sort of continue its actions as a rogue regime. One final note, Wolf, the president right now is visiting the First Lady at Walter Reed Medical Center. He's set to return to the White House here shortly. He will be faced with questions from reporters. We will, of course, bring you any answer that he provides and any statement provided by the White House soon. Wolf.
Thanks very much, Boris Sanchez at the White House. The State Department says it's going ahead with summit preparations. Let's get some more from our senior diplomatic correspondent, Michelle Kaczynski. Michelle, officials there were also clearly blindsided by this North Korean announcement.
Yeah, and this happened right before the briefing. So obviously they didn't know where this was coming from. They didn't know much detail, but kept hitting home the point that it is their understanding still that Kim Jong-un understands or is supposed to understand that these kinds of drills are routine and are not provocative. Listen.
Kim Jong-un had said previously that he understands the need and the utility of the United States and the Republic of Korea continuing in its joint exercises. They're exercises that are legal. They're planned well in advance. We have not heard anything from that government or the government of South Korea to indicate that we would not continue conducting these exercises or that we would not continue planning for our meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un next month.
Yeah, so you heard her say there, Wolf, that the State Department hasn't heard from any government on this, either the North Koreans or the South Koreans. They are scrambling as much as anyone right now to try to figure out what this means.
Michelle Kaczynski, thanks very much. We'll get back to you as well. But joining us right now, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. He's a key member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. I want to talk to you about your very important legislation that you want to introduce later in the week on trying to come up with a balanced budget. But first, let's get back to this top story right now. Talks between North and South Korea, as you heard, have been suspended, a move that potentially could endanger next month's June 12th scheduled summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un in Singapore. Do you believe President Trump made a mistake trusting Kim Jong-un?
You know, I'm hoping it's a temporary setback and that it's their way of protesting against the military exercises. They have long protested against these exercises, and by withdrawing from a meeting today, maybe it voices their protest. But overall, I'm still optimistic that there will be a meeting between President Trump and North Korea, and I'm optimistic that there is a peaceful solution to the whole, war that's been ongoing for 70 some odd years over there now. Quiet for quite a while now, but still we have had no official end to the war. And I think there is a great deal of hope and optimism that with this high-level meeting with Kim Jong-un and the president that we will find peace.
But you remember only a few weeks ago, the North Korean leadership, Kim Jong-un's government, they said they didn't have a problem this time with these annual military U.S.-South Korean military exercises. And all of a sudden today, out of the blue, after the 3 American prisoners were released, the North Koreans issue this statement, not only canceling a meeting with South Korea, but also threatening to cancel the meeting with the President of the United States. Something must have happened. Do you have any idea what's going on?
Well, I would say that I'm not aware of the direct quote where they say, oh, we're fine with the military exercises. I would say they have a long history of not being fine.
Yeah,
with the military
over the years, they always,
Yeah.
I've been covering this story for a long time.
Right.
Until recently, they always complained about these joint U.S.-South Korean exercises. That's why a few weeks ago, when they said, go ahead, we're not going to make a big deal out of it, we're going to move ahead with the summit, that was a major development.
I think that this is consistent with their historic position, and that's why I wouldn't overread what is going on here. I'm hopeful that the talks will still occur, the talks we're talking about having in Singapore. I think those will still occur. I think this is a way of them pushing back on these military exercises. I think from their perspective, they also feel they gave up the 3 prisoners. They've said they're ending nuclear weapons testing. They feel like they've been giving, and they haven't seen at least a little bit on the other side from us. And so I think this is just their way of responding. It's their way of pushing back a little bit, but I don't think it endangers the upcoming talks.
Do you trust Senator Paul? Do you trust Kim Jong-un?
Yeah. Well, I think a better way to put it is that anytime you attempt to have diplomacy with your adversaries or your enemies, it's trust but verify, as Reagan said. And so I think trust is the wrong word. I think to be wary, to be hopeful, to negotiate from a position of strength, all of those things are important. But I think saying you have blind trust in your adversaries would be naive.
What do you think the president should do now? Because clearly he was caught off guard. The administration was caught off guard. How do you think the president should respond?
Well, I think the first thing you do in diplomacy is you have to ask why did this happen, and why, does your opinion appear to be different than it was a few weeks ago? And someone has to get to the bottom of that. And it could be that one official in their government said we weren't too concerned with the military exercises. It could be that was never the position of the government, or it could be that something happened in the exercises that they're particularly aggrieved by. So that only comes about by diplomacy, talking, figuring out exactly what their grievance is, because I think we need to figure that out in order to move forward.
I know you're hopeful that maybe there could be some sort of peaceful development on the Korean Peninsula. Everyone would like to see that, and I suppose, and I know you support direct talks with Kim Jong-un. Would you also, along that vein, support direct talks between President Trump and the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani?
Yeah, I think that we need more discussion and at a higher level with Iran, also with North Korea. And I think the one thing that we have to offer to the Iranian people is the amazing amount of trade the world could bring to Iran. Same thing with North Korea. North Korea has, an economy that struggles. They struggle with food for their people. All of that can be rectified through trade with the world, and all it takes is a less bellicose position on the part of both of those governments. Now, I'm not saying naively it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think discussion is a good thing.
So just to be precise, Senator, you would support direct talks between President Trump and President Rouhani of Iran?
Sure, but I think we've taken a step backwards right now. Unfortunately, getting out of the Iran agreement, I think we're now starting from scratch with Iran, whereas if we would have kept the nuclear agreement in place and tried to build upon that a ballistic missile agreement, I think there was a potential to add to the nuclear agreement. But now I think we've gone back to square one. So I actually think people within the administration who think, oh, this is going to be great and easy, we're now going to get a good deal, and President Obama got a bad deal. I think there's a certain naivete to think, oh, the Iranians are going to be excited about a new deal when we ripped up the old one. No, I think it's going to be a great deal of struggle, and I foresee years and years of trying to figure out how to get better relations with Iran again. I think we've taken a big step backwards.
So you believe the president made a major blunder in ripping up that agreement?
I've always been opposed to ripping it up. I never thought it was a great agreement. I thought we gave the money too quickly to Iran, and that it wasn't over a long period of time to ensure that they would comply. But so far, there's no evidence that they haven't complied with the nuclear agreement. They just have continued to be bellicose with their ballistic missile development program. But we never agreed to that. There was no agreement on ballistic missiles. So I think that it was a mistake to rip up the agreement, and we should have built upon the agreement rather than stepping backwards.
Very quickly, was it a mistake to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
I think it's always been the prerogative of the country who has a capital to decide where their capital is. And really, that decision ultimately is one for Israel. And I think time will tell whether or not there are ramifications of moving it. There was violence yesterday, and there were some deaths yesterday, and there was mass protests in Gaza. So from the standpoint of stability, I think time will tell whether it was a good decision or bad, but I think it is Israel's decision to make where their capital is.
Let's turn to another important issue that you're very deeply involved in. Later this week, the Senate scheduled to vote on a budget proposal that you wrote, and you say this proposal would balance the budget by cutting 1 cent, 1 penny out of every dollar spent. But just last year, you voted for that tax cut bill that that experts, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, among others, said would add $1.5 trillion to the national debt. So how could you claim a higher ground on fiscal conservative, a balanced budget when you supported that legislation?
Well, I've supported tax cuts and spending cuts. And in fact, on that same tax cut bill, I had an amendment that would have allowed for entitlement savings to offset the tax cut. So I think if you're willing to offset tax cuts with spending cuts, there's no hypocrisy there. The penny plan is what I'm introducing on Thursday, and there'll be a vote. Cuts 1 penny out of every dollar, and the budget actually balances in 5 years. So it's really about a $30 billion cut each year. It's something that there's that much waste. You can find that much waste under every rock here in Washington. I'll give you one example. In Afghanistan, we learned this week that we spent $90 million on a luxury hotel that was never completed, and now they're talking about tearing it down because they're afraid snipers will go up in this half-built hotel. That abounds throughout government. Everywhere you look, there is waste. I'm giving people a chance to say, here's a conservative budget, and conservatives will have a chance on Thursday to show if they really are conservative or whether or not they're fake conservatives.
Well, we'll see what happens when this legislation comes up for a vote, and it will come up for a vote. Senator Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
There's more breaking news we're following.